Good morning. I'm Dr. Sherry Ben, Chair of the Texas State University 2020 Elections Task Force. And I want to welcome you to our 2021 Virtual Community Inauguration Program. If you're not familiar with the Texas State 2020 Elections Task Force, we are a group of students, faculty, and staff who have been working together to facilitate preparation and community and civic engagement during the 2020 electoral season. We have done this by promoting, encouraging, and coordinating collaborative opportunities for constructive educational bipartisan events and the development of educational materials and resources. During the fall semester, we sponsored voter registration drives, town halls with political candidates. We even sponsored a watch party with BOCO. We had a fraternity and sorority day at the polls, a post-election student leaders panel, and we even provided election stress kits with the help of the Counseling Center and student involvement. Thank you, student involvement. Y'all been a major help to us, to the committee. Thank you. So today's program is the final event of the task force. This event is an interactive virtual program to celebrate the time-honored tradition of our country's inauguration. Today's program will include faculty speakers, virtual Kahoots games, prizes, interesting political and inaugural factoids shared by student members of the task force, and of course, the streaming of the swearing in and recitation of the oaths for the president-elect and vice president-elect Joseph R. Biden and Kamala Harris. By the way, those of you who prevail as winners during our Kahoots games, you will be able to pick up prizes that are sponsored by, have been donated by athletics and goodie bags sponsored by the Elections Task Force. During the games portion of the program, we will provide you instructions on how to retrieve your prizes and goodie bags. Now, to conclude my remarks, I'm going to say something obvious that necessitates stating so as not to ignore the reality of the turbulent times we are currently experiencing in this, our democracy. And so it is necessary that we provide some historical context to a day of national tradition, considering the events that transpired at the Capitol complex in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Indeed, historians, journalists, social commentators, as well as many others will be focusing on the continuing unfolding of these happenings for some time. Our nation is in a process of a very difficult transformation that we cannot ignore. And what it requires of us will be ongoing dialogue, difficult and courageous conversations, as well as bold actions, so that we do not digress and devolve deeper into the national divide that has in fact always existed in this, our republic, though some have been in denial about this painful truth. Painful truth is like an alarm clock trying to wake us up. Now we can either hit the snooze button and doze back off, or we can nudge ourselves into an upright position in order to meet the uncomfortable at times and what can seem like a glaring moment of the day. But here's the thing, we will either meet the day where it is, but we cannot meet it where we want it to be. So we either have to meet it where it is, or we really are not going to be able to meet it at all. It's not going to be easy, but it will be far better than continuously repeating these painful moments if we fail, to acknowledge and face them. Why is all this happening now? I'm so glad you asked. It's happening now because, as the proverb goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. What does that mean? It means that we are now ready to learn those things we have just not wanted to know. To help us grapple with this educational, albeit at times painful process, today we have some of our esteemed faculty members from the Department of History and Political Science who will be giving us some context to this current existential instant of history making that we are currently in. And so now I'm going to turn this virtual mic over to Dr. Mary Brennan. She is a member of the Elections Task Force, and she is also our Dean of the College of Liberal Arts. Dean Brennan.
Thank you, Dr. Ben, for your inspiring words and call to action. Both the inspiration and the call are appropriate for today's ceremony. Inaugurations are times of celebration, heralding new beginnings and new possibilities. Today's celebration begins under the shadow cast by the shocking events of January 6th. On that day, Americans invaded the US Capitol in an attempt to overturn the certification of the election of the next president because their candidate had not won. In order to understand how extraordinary this invasion truly was, and to discuss the implications for today's ceremony, I am going to turn to a panel of historians and political scientists to set these events into a broader context. I am joined by political scientist Ken Ward and history professors Angela Murphy, Jeffrey Helgeson, and Louis Dean Valencia. Let me begin by asking Professor Ward to provide some general background on the inauguration of US presidents. Dr. Ward.
Hi, I was going to talk about the events and the inauguration in light of really an odd aspect of our political system. We have a republic that was designed to express the will of the people and to be representative of us all, where sovereignty is with the people. And on top of that, we've grafted a system of political parties, of political interests pursuing their interests through parties, which wasn't really supposed to be a part of the system, but really within 8 years of our history, it became part of the system. And in the events of the last weeks and the Trump presidency as a whole, you really see those conflicts coming together. The inauguration, the transition period, the honeymoon that's supposed to happen after the inauguration is a coming together of the people. It's an expression of we the people. It's who we are. It's saying that we're above our politics. We have a sort of breath where we stop competing politically and we start to govern as a whole. And that's very different than parliamentary systems where there is no transition. As soon as the election is over, the new people are in charge. They're less concerned about in American constitutional politics, we talk about factions taking over the government. And so instead of having institutions of checks and balances where the factions are sort of worked out, the factions take over until they're replaced by another faction. And so we're dealing with a system where our factions have a voice now because of political parties being in a very effective way to govern. And you kind of see the tension in the aftermath of the election, where the states were where the election was being contested in states and very minor political figures. A Secretary of State of Georgia, who's a Republican, an election commissioner in Michigan who has to certify the election. You have these Republicans who are put in this position of having to either pursue their party interest or pursue the principles of American government, the coming together, the things we're celebrating with the inauguration. And you sort of see the strangeness of what's happened there because people had to choose. And those officials chose the Republic. And now you sort of see some backlash against them because the parties are kicking in, because you have these sort of two incompatible systems that are playing with one another again. I guess the last way to think about it, just if you think about the most unpopular figure in American politics right now, it's probably Mitch McConnell, who's sort of twisted himself into this pretzel where he's simultaneously saying we have to come together. Now that he's in the minority, they have to come together and remember that we're all being represented in the government after he spent 4 years trying to pursue his partisan interests. And at the same time, his own party is mad at him because he's abandoning their partisan interests. And so the inauguration is a way to sort of get past that and for everyone to come together and think, hey, we are a people and we are a republic. And I think that's the main thing to get out of the next few months, at least, while we can enjoy, hopefully, some peace of not having to be at each other's throats constantly.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. I think that's a good way. It's a very interesting way for us to begin thinking about these different kind of ways that we have of thinking about the government. But it does create a problem sometimes. Dr. Murphy, have there been times in American history when new presidents have come to power in the midst of a divide, a political divide, or circumstances that lead to some kinds of problems? Could you give us an example or of a time when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's numerous examples that we could talk about, but I think probably most appropriate for today is to talk about a really early example, and that's Jefferson's election in 1801. It's a very fitting example because there's a lot of similarities to the situation we're now in that kind of paved the way for that inauguration. And he also, it's important because he set some precedents that have kind of been followed in inaugurations and transfers of power that followed. So the 1800 election that preceded that inauguration was the first time two clearly opposing parties with very different visions of the republic were pitted against each other. You had the Federalist Party, which had a vision of a commercial United States with a strong national government, which was backing the incumbent, John Adams. And he ran against his vice president at the time before the 12th Amendment was passed in response to this election. The vice president was the second vote getter. And so you had Jefferson and Adams together there. So Jefferson ran as a Democratic Republican challenger. He kind of a party coalesced around a new ideology that saw a more agrarian vision of the future of the nation. It was more distrustful of central power and emphasized state governments to a greater degree. So during the 1790s, they all came together. And like now, you have two parties with very, very different ideas, right? Going forward with the trajectory going forward in the nation. And so, as was true for our recent year, the presidential campaign of 1800 was absolutely fraught and actually downright dirty. There were partisan newspapers on both sides of the issue making scathing statements about the main candidate from the opposing party. The Jeffersonian Republicans accused Adams of being a monarchist. The Federalists said that Jefferson was an atheist. There were many, many more dirtier remarks about their personal lives, which we don't have time to get into without opening up a whole can of worms. But anyway, the country was very, very divided by this campaign, and the press was very involved with that division. And so you can kind of see some similarities there. And then the results of this election also led to a disputed result that kind of fired people up further. It pitted Federalists and Republicans in Congress against each other. So during the election, each party ran two candidates with the hope for the Republicans, they wanted Jefferson to win the presidency, and fellow Republican Aaron Burr, it was intended that he become his vice president. But so to do this, one of the electors were to withhold a vote so that Jefferson would have the clear majority. But that did not happen. When the electoral votes were counted, they were tied. And so the House of Representatives had to choose the next president. So Federalists had actually clearly lost the election, but they saw an opportunity here to try to elicit concessions from the opposing party by standing in the way of Jefferson becoming president. And it really precipitated a real crisis. There were talks of holding another election. Some were suggesting military action if Federalists didn't accept Jefferson's election. There were threats made against the electors, trying to sway them one way or another. It's finally ended with some of the electors from the South abstaining from voting, which allowed Jefferson a clear majority. And then, as I said, the 12th Amendment later combines the presidential and vice presidential tickets in order to avoid this situation in the future. But anyway, it was a very, very tumultuous election like we're seeing now. And so that takes us to the inauguration. As the case today, actually, John Adams declined to attend the election. He left for Massachusetts as Jefferson gave his speech and took his oath of office. So Jefferson stepped into the presidency. The inauguration at the time, I think it was 1937 that it changed to January. The inauguration at the time was held in March. And so Jefferson takes his oath of office and gives a very, very famous, actually, inaugural address that really does help kind of set the tone for the future. So there's really two very significant things I want to point out about the inauguration in 1801. One, and probably most important, is it set a precedent for a peaceful transfer of power when a new party supplants an older party or an opposing party in an election. And a lot of people called the election of 1800 the Revolution of 1800 because Jefferson's ideas were quite different than Adams and George Washington's before him. And it did mean a new path for the United States when he took office. in these early years of the Republic. But it's also notable that this was a peaceful revolution. This is the time of Napoleon in Europe, and the nation was in its infancy. It was only 11 years old at the time, and people had no idea what was going to happen when you have this really fraught election leading to results that are disputed. So it was notable that there's a transfer of power. It did not devolve into violence. There was a concession of the Federalists. People had to work together going forward. And that leads me to the last really important point I want to make about Jefferson, and his inaugural address itself set a significant precedent because he sought to unify the country after the very difficult election. There's a really famous quote where he says, "We're all Federalists, we are all Republicans," when he stands before the crowd that's gathered. And so he said this hoping to promote peace and unity, but also because he wanted to gain support for the changes that he would make when he steps into office. It's much better if people can work together in order to govern a nation instead of being at each other's throats. So most other presidents have followed suit in adopting a conciliatory tone at the inauguration, especially after a really divisive election, because it's to their benefit and to the nation's benefit. So I would expect, as we look at the inauguration today, we will probably see such a tone coming from President-elect Biden.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I think that really helps to kind of clarify some of the beginnings. But it was not, of course, the last election that was contested or that took place in the midst of a crisis the way that we have today. Dr. Helgeson, could you give us perhaps an example of something in the 20th century, it was a little more recent, or that we could kind of use to look at today's election?
Sure. Yeah, I think something to keep in mind as we kind of think about these events, as as Ken was saying, about kind of a moment when the people come together and begin to govern rather than engaging in politics, or as Angie's saying, kind of this moment to try to unify people. As presidents became more and more powerful over the late 19th and 20th centuries, they also really tried to use these events to try to frame the ways that they would use their new power if they could use the power the way they wanted to. Today, in the wake of the insurrection that reached into the nation's capital, the transfer of power is being framed in terms of the ability to defend the very integrity of the democratic process, the basic trust that even those who disagree with us will seek to do right by the whole people. It's a fragile and never fully satisfied trust. And in some cases, the assaults upon it are explicit or even violent. And I think in the 20th century, I think of various examples, but one of them is Franklin Delano Roosevelt's first and actually his second inaugurals as well. When the new president pointed to the people he called the money changers in the temple and the economic royalists who had forsaken the good of all in the name of greed, as is the way he was framing it. And he was saying that he was going to use his power to bring the people back into governing, that he would find a way to make the government work for the people through a new deal. In the midst of an international political crisis, accompanied by this tragically severe depression, FDR believed he saw the threats of revolution from below on the left and a top-down fascist revolution on the right. He sought to incorporate the masses of people in a remade economy while reining in the power of the right with a legislatively led process of reform. In the wake of his inaugurals, he faced unceasing resistance, both from the nation's corporate leaders and from those in the unreconstructedly racist regions of the nation, where Americans sought to ensure that reform would not disrupt entrenched social hierarchies. I think we're seeing now.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. They're starting the swearing in.
Oh, they're starting it already?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're going to transition back after this, okay?
Okay. Yeah, I think I would just end by saying that this is an opportunity.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Held the chief played for Joe Biden. Joseph Robinette Biden will be the 46th president of the United States. He was congratulated as Mr. President. He will officially become president in about 9 minutes, 9.5 minutes at noon as he's giving the address. Saw Dr. Joe Biden overcome with emotion in that moment. Who wouldn't be? David Muir, the quest of a lifetime for Joe Biden.
George, this was the ultimate long game. He was elected to the Senate at 29, the youngest. Will now be sworn in as the oldest president. He has waited and he has dreamed of this moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, please
so
be
many
seated.
years. He has told me the president's job is to heal, that the country needs healing, and he told me the words of a president matter.
Dr. Joe Biden there, First Lady of the United States. The bells at Howard University will now ring 49 times before the inaugural address.
Fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this. Bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. history, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. This is what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic, those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
The inaugural address of Joseph Robinette Biden, now 46th President of the United States. Powerful, personal, emotional at times, delivered with command. The new president called Americans to empathy and action. He noted those events of 2 weeks ago, the siege of the Capitol, noted that our democracy is fragile, is precious, but it
All right, so that was amazing, and we're sorry we interrupted that awesome panel discussion that we were having, that our faculty members were having, and we're going to go ahead and continue that so that they can wrap up. But we felt it was important that we not miss this historic addressed, particularly because we're celebrating a historical tradition. And so we wanted to all be able to partake in that tradition. So we will commence, we will continue with that panel discussion that our esteemed faculty members were having. I was back here ugly crying, but I got myself straight before we came back. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dean Brennan and our esteemed faculty colleagues.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ben, and I'm glad that you did interrupt us because we did not want to miss that. It's very important to be able to take part in these historic events when they're happening. But I am going to turn back to Dr. Helgeson now so that he can kind of wrap up what he was talking about and maybe kind of relate to what we just heard.
Sure, I'll try. Yeah, I feel a little bit like I'm the pundit I never wanted to be. We're coming back after the event, so we get to try to put it in some context. I mean, a lot of what I was going to say about the kind of notes that that President Biden was going to try to hit, he actually hit, right? There's this kind of concern for unity, but also I think he's trying to indicate the way he's going to use his newfound power, right? To attack the pandemic head on, to take on racial inequality and systemic racism, to address the crises of untruth and the lack of faith and truth that we're seeing in our society right now. He's arguing, I think, for a kind of use of federal power to be able to make right what he sees as wrong. And I think that the thing that I take away from recent presidential history, recent in terms of the 20th century, is that presidents have tried to do this. What I think is interesting to take away as a citizen is that this moment, the honeymoon moment that Ken was talking about, or the kind of coming together moment, is going to end. And that the people who had been kind of pushing this movement that for white supremacy, white power, for inequality, for certain kinds of power rather than the public good, as President Biden put it, many of them are still in power. And so I think what we need to think about as citizens is how this peaceful transition of power today, right, can bring into office a kind of, or at least hopefully bring into office a kind of a president who will have immense power, but they're never going to have enough power to fully shape the future the way they want it to be. The future will always continue to be made of contests. The peaceful transition of executive power, then, we will hope, will make those contests political and not something that resembles war, as I think is what we've seen recently. And I think that that's what the president was trying to do today, and that's what I'm hoping that his comments and that this process of peaceful transitional power will enable.
Thank you, Dr. Helgeson. And I think that was a really nice kind of connection back to where we started with Dr. Ward in terms of talking about both the coming together of the two aspects of the American experiment, but also how we have this peaceful transfer of power and what we hope will happen. I think the other thing that's interesting about the inaugural address is also that he was looking to the rest of the world, because this is not just something that happens for the American people, but what happens for the American people also has an effect on and is affected by the rest of the world. So Dr. Valencia, what do you think? I mean, we were going to talk about what we thought was going to happen. So what is the rest of the world thinking about these events today?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I was doing this morning was looking through newspapers around the world to kind of get an idea of what was being said about today. So the British this morning awoke to a Guardian headline stating that Joe Biden was to be sworn in, quote, amid turmoil and loss in the United States. The news story started off reminding the reader that Biden would be inaugurated on the same stage that had been seized by the mob just 2 weeks prior. Curiously, the British don't have the type of ceremony that we do. They elect a prime minister in parliament, who then, behind closed doors, is asked to form a government by the Queen. I imagine this occurs over tea or brandy or something like that. In a sense, our very public inauguration is quite different. The Mexican newspaper La Jornada focused on immigration, COVID, and on the 6th of January in its inauguration story. A mention of the National Guard juxtaposed to a comment about the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial in the article had me think for the first time ever about the purpose of a reflecting pool, to look at ourselves critically, not just as a reflection of the grandeur of the hallowed space. The French Le Monde described the US Capitol as, quote, traumatized, and called the occupation area a red zone, which surprised me with its directness. In lieu of an actual celebration, the article ended with, quote, Americans will have to be content with the 90-minute television show called Celebrating America, which had a tinge of irony that only the French can really add to it. The Spanish newspaper, El País, led with a headline on its section dedicated to the investiture of Biden, paying special attention to the appearances of both Lady Gaga and J-Lo. They also ran a story highlighting the voices of Americans ranging from ages 18, who one person said that the country needed to start talking about racism and assist undocumented immigrants, to an 80-year-old woman who was hoping Biden could restore a sense of unity in the United States, something he touched about in his address just now. One man told the paper, quote, as a Black man, I can tell you that a new president doesn't change anything. This country was corrupt from the beginning. It's a machine, end quote, which also left me thinking. This all got me thinking about the word inauguration. Instead of the word investiture, which is common in Spanish, inauguration first became used by the French in the 1560s. I'm an historian, so I have to look this stuff up, right? Which is earlier than I totally would have imagined. So investiture, meaning taking the clothing of office, which was also in the Spanish article, is sometimes used interchangeably with the phrase tomar la posesión del presidente, or taking possession of the presidency, both of which probably would ring strange to most Americans. Taking the clothing of office sounds more apt for a king, and possession sounds more like a dictator. I like the word inauguration. Coming from the late Latin, it takes its name from the ancient Roman augurs, who were these people who sort of were at ceremonies and foretold the events by observing signs and omens. But digging a little deeper into that etymology, the word augurs comes from the Old Latin augos, which meant to increase, sort of like augmenting something, which is where we kind of get our augmenting. For the ancient Romans, it was part of the hope to increase crops by having this ritual ceremony. And I hope this ritual practice that we engage in every 4 years will move us closer to the yet elusive dream of equality. If we don't renew our desire for this unfulfilled promise, party politics aside, reflecting upon where we fall short, we will surely reap what we sow. And so I like the word inauguration. It's a reflection, it's a beginning, it's a hope for something to be increased. And hopefully that increase is a little bit of this American dream that's been so elusive to us over the centuries, but we're striving toward.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. I think it was good to have the context of the word itself, which I do think kind of sets things apart and kind of sets things in motion. I appreciate all of our panelists who have helped to put things into a context. And I am going to turn back to Dr. Ben, who is going to lead us in the celebration part of the inauguration, because as we pointed out, today is the beginning of the honeymoon. And so you always begin a honeymoon with a celebration. And we hope the honeymoon lasts a while, but it is still a celebration. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Dr. Ben. And thank you very much, panelists, for helping to put these into a broader perspective.
Yes, thank you all so much. You were awesome, so amazing. Thank you for giving us some great context, historical understanding, and just the significance of not only what's happening today, but historically, the celebration of this tradition. So thank you all so very much. And yes, we are continuing to celebrate, because this is a national day of celebration for us. And I do love a honeymoon period, let me tell you that. So one of the things that is happening right now, and hopefully we can catch a little bit of this before we start our fun games, the Kahoots and other celebratory things that we're going to incorporate into today's event, is there is the youth poet laureate that is performing now. And so I'm going to ask Robert if he could transition us. So maybe we could get just a taste of that. I think that's important because we'll be going back and forth throughout the program today so that we can catch a glimpse of some of the things that are happening. I'm sure you're probably also watching them simultaneously while you're on here with us. Robert.
A friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our president, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being, regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, oh God. As such, teach us, oh God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Echoes of Martin Luther King Jr. there in the benediction of Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman with a prayer and a plea for unity in this country so deeply divided right now. Cecilia Vega, unity, the theme of the day, the theme of this inaugural ceremony, the theme of Joe Biden's presidential campaign, clearly going to be the early theme of his presidency. He said, "My whole soul is in this, bringing America together."
George, this was an inaugural speech aimed at uniting the country, but so much of this was speaking directly to Donald Trump supporters or those who may be doubting Joe Biden's legitimacy. He said, "We won this. This is democracy. You are seeing it in action. It's not about a candidate. Democracy has prevailed." But he also used this moment to attempt to reclaim truth. We just saw an outgoing president who, by counts, issued more than 33 some odd thousand assaults on the truth, mistruths, and this was about taking truth and reclaiming facts, George.
He did do that, and Mary Bruce, you're there at the Capitol today. He did not shy away from mentioning that siege of the Capitol 2 weeks ago. Told the country, told the world, what we saw there will not prevail.
It was a fierce rejection of that kind of hate, of that kind of violence, as he did make this call for unity. And George, I have to say, I've listened to a lot of Joe Biden speeches, and he talks about unity a lot. And what always strikes me is that Biden is not a man of hyperbole. He views unity not as some lofty goal, but as a practical necessity. And you heard that here today, him saying to tackle this pandemic, to address racial injustice, the country's going to have to come together. Put aside your differences and work towards some common goals. As he said, without unity, there is no progress. And of course, without many.
All right, I was trying to unmute myself, excuse me. All right, so unfortunately, we missed the youth poet. However, we did get some spiritual words of inspiration from that prayer. And the thing I do want to acknowledge is there are people of faith in our country, but there are also people who are agnostic and who are atheist. And because we live in a pluralistic society, it's important that we acknowledge that we have a broad spectrum of beliefs and differences with regard to worldviews. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because even though there's been a tradition of praying during inaugural addresses, during those inaugural celebrations, we also know that there are members of our community who don't necessarily subscribe to any particular faith community or a spiritual worldview. All right, so at this time, what we're going to do is we're going to get geared up for one of our games. All right, and so this is going to be really exciting. And we've got Dr. Jennifer Lamb. She's just one of my favorite faculty members here out of the Department of Political Science. And she's going to share a bit of information with us. And then she's going to transition us into the fun part. And this is where you'll be able to win prizes for your participation in the Cahoots games. So Dr. Lamb.
Hello, and thank you, Dr. Ben, for turning things over to me. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully everyone knows how to play Cahoots games at home. If you don't, it's pretty easy. Hold on. Can you all see and hear that? Can someone just give me a little thumbs
We
up?
sure can. We can hear it and we can see it.
Okay. So if you already have an account, you can just go to Kahoot It. You can log on with the Kahoot app. And there is time if you need to quickly add or download that Kahoot app. You can play from your phone. You just enter this game pin and you'll be added. Okay, we're going to give everyone about 1 more minute to add the game if they can before we get started. Okay, so remember, on the line are wonderful prizes provided by the Department of Athletics. You can, even if you haven't joined already, you can join our game at any time. Just enter the PIN. And we're going to get started with game number 1. So this is on inauguration trivia, other kind of things in the news. So this question is, which article in the US Constitution talks about the President of the United States or the executive? Oh, wow, a lot of fast answers coming in. Oh, it's Article 2. So Article 1 deals with the legislature or Congress. Article 2 with the president. Article 3 with the Supreme Court of the United States or the federal courts. And there are just a few more articles to the US Constitution, actually. All right, number 2, here we go. Yeah. Oh. No. All right, I'm gonna have to reload. Darn it. Well, you might get to redo that one. Yeah, you get to redo that. I apologize for that as always. All right, here's the new game pin. Please enter it. All right, we're gonna get started again. Hopefully this works completely. You probably remember which article of the Constitution it talks about. Sweet, learning has occurred. All right. This question asks about how a president of the United States, or the POTUS for short, is chosen. By a majority of what votes? Yes, it is in the Electoral College. Everyone knows that. Very good. Silver Hawk coming up. How many votes does a candidate need to win in the Electoral College to win a majority? Great. 270, so 535, that's the total, divided by 2 plus 1, so just over 50% is 270. Silverhawk still up there. Wonderful. One of the panelists mentioned this. It asks about when the 12th Amendment was ratified, and this is to elect the president and vice president on a single ticket. Very good. 1804. This was after that bitter election with Jefferson. Ooh. Oh, come on. Really?
Okay, I think the Cahoots game has it out for Dr. Lamb. I don't know what's going on because these are so much fun. This has been so much fun. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Carrying Possum jumped to the lead over Silverhawk, who was steadily keeping that first place position. So Carrying Possum, we wanna let you know how you could collect your prize. Okay, so oh, and all of you who are playing are welcome to come in to get a goodie bag. So the prizes and the goodie bags can be picked up in the LBJ Student Center in the Institutional Inclusive Excellence Suite. Okay, and that is on the second floor of the LBJ Student Center, Suite 2-2.0. We're going to continue. We're going to pick up another game. While Dr. Lamb kind of figures out what's going on here, how about if we get a political factoid from one of our student leaders? Let's see. Catherine, are you available to give us a factoid? How about Christy?
Hello.
Hey, Christy. You want to give us a factoid while we're waiting on Dr. Lamb to get us geared back up? It's okay. This is just supposed to be fun, so everybody relax, and we'll get back to the games, but we still have good prizes and goodie bags. All right, Christy.
All right. Hello, I'm Christy Nguyen. I'm a sophomore history major, and I'm representing top scholars in institutional inclusive excellence. And did you know that the inaugural address is used by presidents at the start of their term to outline their visions and goals for the country? So John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, Chester Arthur, and Gerald Ford did not give inaugural addresses because they were elevated to the presidency after a president died, or in Nixon's case, resigned from office. Another fact is John Kennedy's inaugural address in 1961 promised that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty. In his second inaugural address, Obama proclaimed that while freedom is a gift from God, it must be secured by his people here on earth. He called for laws to combat climate change, enactment of immigration reform, and gun control. And the longest inaugural address was given by William Henry Harrison in 1841 and included 8,445 words. President William Henry Harrison died just 30 days later in 1841. And that's your inauguration address facts.
All right. Thank you, Christy. That was awesome. All right, Dr. Lim, we want to try and give it another shot. We got to keep doing this because it's the fun part.
No, I agree. So I'm resharing again this first game. We'll skip the first two questions.
Okay.
But there are a lot of really exciting questions in these games. So I want to make sure that we get to them. So the new pin is 4985127. All right, we'll get started. Remember, you can rejoin. You can join at any time, rather. I'm going to skip the first two. Good job. Or three, rather, we did. I'll skip this one too. Oh, come on. Hey, Dr. Ben, can we go to another factoid? And while we figure out it, maybe someone else can deploy the game.
I don't think Dr. Ben's.
Is another student task force member available to share a factoid?
Hi, my name is Maya Napier. My major is criminal justice and I have a minor in psychology. I'm a junior here and I'm representing Institutional Inclusive Excellence as well as Black Student Alliance. So my fact is that the terms of the president and vice president shall end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of senators and representatives at noon on the 3rd day of January. Another fact is that George Washington's second inaugural address remains the shortest ever delivered, at just 135 words, starting with, fellow citizens, I am again called upon by the voice of my country to execute the functions of its chief magistrate. This address was given on March 4th, 1793.
I have another fact. Did you know that President Obama was the first president who was not a white man?
Huh.
Hello, I am LaTanya Henry. I'm the Student Affairs Supervisor at Round Rock campus, and I represent the Office of the Dean of Students, the Coalition of Black Faculty and Staff, and I'm also a member of the 2020 Elections Task Force. I have an inauguration factoid for you. The Constitution of the United States of 1787 established March 4th as Inauguration Day in order to allow enough time after Election Day for officials to gather election returns and for newly elected candidates to travel to the Capitol. George Washington delivered the first inaugural address on April 30th, 1789. The inauguration date was moved up because of improvements in transportation. Some people say the transition period from November to January is still too long and should be shortened. That's another factoid for you.
That's awesome. And how awesome it is for us to have LaTanya here representing Round Rock, our Round Rock campus. All right, so let's do some more factoid. We're going to try to figure out what's going on with the cahoots, but in the meantime, we're going to ask that Christy, Maya, that you all continue to share, and LaTanya continue to share factoids while we're figuring out what we're going to do about the cahoots game. And we have so many prizes over here, so we've got to do something. Maybe I'll just pop on here and ask questions and you can just put an answer in the chat box. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's get another factoid. Christy, how about you? Come on, Christy.
Okay, so the 20th Amendment moved the date of inauguration from March to the noon of the 20th day in January. Under the Constitution, the outgoing president continues to hold full power through 1159-59 and then power shifts to the incoming president at noon. This amendment was ratified by the states in 1933 when 36 of the then 48 states voted in favor of the amendment. And that's your factoid.
Hi. So another factoid is that Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address of 1865 might be the most famous and is often regarded as the most elegant.
Okay, so Latanya, do you have any more another factoid you'd like to share?
I do. There have been 58 inaugurations since 1789. The oath has been administered at 58 scheduled public inaugurations by 15 chief justices, 1 associate justice, and 1 New York State judge. And you might be asking yourself, 58? Biden is the 46th president, and that's correct. But some of the presidents, as we've learned from our factoids, did not give inaugural addresses, and some of our presidents gave more than 1 inaugural address.
That's very interesting because as soon as you said that number 58, it got me confused a little bit. So I appreciate that. Okay, so Robert, maybe we could go to some of the streaming that's happening, if there's any other things, whatever else is happening with regard to the inauguration. And then we're going to see if we can get the cahoots geared back up so that we can continue this fun time of celebration. So we'll be right back with you.
He thought was going to remain president is not going to do so, despite the fact that he said that this election was stolen. We have a lot of work left to do for this country. Chris Christie touched on this. Tomorrow the work is going to begin. It will take a lot of effort to bring this country back together beyond just condemning that insurrection that happened back in Washington, D.C., George.
The fact that so many people, so many Americans do not believe that he was legitimately elected is a serious issue. That's why he had to address it directly in the speech. Thank you, Trevor. Kana Whitworth is in Sacramento. Hey, Kana.
Hey, George, so I have to tell you, among lawmakers here in Sacramento and in California, there is an added sense of pride that our vice president is from California. It's the first time that we've had a vice president from the West Coast in some 60 years. And when I spoke with the mayor here in Sacramento, he said, I was an early supporter here of Kamala Harris. He considers her a friend. They served together. And George, he went on to say that he feels an enormous amount of relief that they are ending the Trump era. And he went on to say that he can't help but feeling a little bit, if not a lot, hopeful about what's ahead. So again, that added sense of pride and even some relief here in California today. I also want to point out that as you look here behind me, you can see this fence that has been erected around the Capitol. We have National Guard troops on these city streets and police officers protecting the state capitol as well. All the police officers here have been denied their days off. They're working 12-hour shifts to keep this city safe. And I spoke with a Trump supporter who, instead of watching the inauguration, decided to walk his dog right out here. But you know what he told me, George? Without even hearing President Joe Biden's speech, he spoke of unity. He said, as a Trump supporter, we have been seeing unrest and violence break out in this city for the last 10 weeks. And without even seeing that speech, he echoed what he was saying. He wants to see unity here as well. So that's something that here in the state capital of California, they're hoping for. It's almost an eerily quiet scene here, George. I've spent a lot of time here, and usually there's a lot of people surrounding the state capitol, but it seems quiet today. perhaps an air of hope that positive change is ahead. This, well, I do want to mention that we hear Antifa groups are possibly gathering a few blocks away, and so we'll have to see what the rest of this day here brings. George.
Kena Whitworth, thanks. You have to take another quick break. We'll be right back.
ABC News live coverage of the inauguration of President Joe Biden. Streaming now.
En mi mundo, I enjoy the best of both worlds. Y así, disfruto el doble. And when you live and dream in two cultures, you need spectrum.
Hello. Could you mute that? Hi, so we are going to try one more time with our Kahoot. So let's go ahead and get the game pulled up. Bam. So our new game pin is 1371795. All right, we see you, Helpful Wombat, Captain Dragon. Who else do we have? And if we could get our lovely host, Dr. Lamb, to join us again.
I'm here. What do you want me to like narrate? I kind of like it better when you're doing it. Encouraging all the animals to play and all.
Swift Penguin is on the board. We see you. Wonder Camel. All right, we got Noble Swan, Lovely Bear, Bold Goat, Common Crane, Magic Panther just joined us. If you're just logged in, type in the hoop code, choose your random name, and enter the game pattern. We're gonna get started in about 90 seconds. We got Captain Shark, Cucumber Turtle, Swift Fox. About 45 more seconds. We got Bright Wallaby into the chat. Blue Koala is also in the game. About 10 more seconds. Hurry up and enter that code and pattern. All right, let's get it started. Now, I guess we got a couple of freebies for the ones who were on before.
Oh, Kirby, you might want to skip the first couple, three, that we already did.
One more. All right. The 12th Amendment, ratified in blank, elects the president and the VP on the single ticket. 1804, 1874, 1954, or 1984. All righty. 1804. Dr. Lamb.
Okay, yeah, we did this one as well, so I totally forgot. The next one is new.
Cool beans. But right now we got Captain Dragon up top, Wonder Camel coming right behind him. So let's see. The U.S. Constitution specifies that blank, sign and certify general election vote counts. The Congress, the Attorney General of the U.S., the mainstream media, or the states.
Wow. Guys, okay, so the Congress, then there's the next question about what the Congress's role is, but the US Constitution specifies that the states are the ones who carry out the election, and they sign, usually the Secretary of State for each state signs them, and they certify their elections, and this occurs usually in December. Go ahead, Kirby.
Captain Dragon still with the lead, but Wonder Camel is really coming up to him. The U.S. Capitol building was attacked on January 6th when climate change forced a flock of seagulls inland. The Congress received and counted the Electoral College vote. The Electoral College met to vote, or the states certified their vote tally. Take your pick. You have 10 seconds.
Great. So the US Constitution specifies that the states carry out the general election, and the states sign and certify their votes. These are certified in December. The Electoral College meets in December. And then on January 6th, that's when the results of the Electoral College are transmitted to Congress. And it says that Congress shall open and count the Electoral College votes. So they're just opening the votes, which, you know, back in the day, I guess it would be news to some people, but now that we have all this media, it's pretty much instantaneous. So it's a little confusing, but good job. Ooh.
Captain Dragon is serious about this prize. Wonder Camel, we believe in you. Swift Penguin's not far behind either. Let's see who's gonna take the top. The U.S. Constitution was amended in 1951 to limit a candidate's eligibility for president to 2 terms, authorize the president of the United States only to use nuclear weapons, provide for a standing military, or prohibit the process. That's not good.
Oh.
We were doing so well.
Yeah, so it would seem that Cahoots really hates us. Cahoots doesn't like us. And I'm learning so much. This is awesome. And Dr. Lamb, your educational commentary is really helpful. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to transition from the game, and we need to make note of who the winner was so that person can come and collect their prize in the Institutional Inclusive Suite in the LBJ Student Center, second floors, Suite 2-2.0. What we are going to do, and if you were just participating, please feel free to come by and pick up a goodie bag for participating.
And Dr. Ben, if you don't mind, before we go to the next thing, I just want to quickly, so for the remainder of this first Kahoot game, this question, I'll just provide the answer. So this question asks about the US Constitution was amended in 1951, and that limited a candidate's eligibility to 2 presidential terms. This was after FDR was elected to 4 presidential terms, and they decided, no, we'll go with what Washington did, his precedent, 2 terms and then retire. So that's what we're going to limit to. So sadly, the poll tax and the all-white primary, they were not prohibited by the Constitution until the 1960s. And then there are 2 questions after this that ask about what's called the Habitation Clause in the Constitution. And this clause for president and vice president, and this clause states that the president and the vice president have to be residents of different states. Now, this was because at the time the Constitution was written, the people in charge, the founders, they were really concerned about, who's going to control this new national government. And they thought that the vice president who gets to cast the deciding vote if the Senate is equally divided, this would give extra representation to a state. This is really different than how we think about it today, because we're not worried that Kamala Harris is going to be favoring the state of California, right, in her vice presidential votes. But the founders were really worried about it. It shows you the difference between what it was, how the United States was at the time of the founding versus today. So the Habitation Clause says that the president and the vice president have to be from different states. This is why Governor Bush's vice presidential candidate, Dick Cheney, he owned a home in Texas, but he quickly, right before the 2000 election, the month before, changed his voter registration and license to the state of Wyoming. So because there was a case filed against them in court about, hey, they're both residents of Texas, and that's not fair. And then the last question asked about the president whose supporters famously trashed the White House after inauguration. They had an open White House party. And this was President Jackson. He was, very popular. And so he opened the White House to just anyone who wanted to drop by. It was a drop-in, and they totally trashed the White House. It had to be rebuilt.
Well, who knew he was such a party animal? Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Lamb. Those are so interesting, things that I just wasn't aware of and didn't know. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we transition to the Youth Poet Laureate?
No, let's hear from the Youth Poet Laureate.
Okay.
Swift Penguin, good job.
All right, Robert, we're going to go ahead and transfer so we can hear from the poet. All right, look at the Captain Dragon, number 1. Woohoo! Wonder Camel and Swift Penguin.
Oh, wow.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow. How's that for a national debut? Most of us will remember where we were when we heard Joe Biden take the oath of office, give his inaugural address. We will all remember when we heard Amanda Gorman speak to the world as America's first National Youth Poet Laureate.
All right, that was awesome. The first Youth Poet Laureate. So, speaking of another first, we are going to now show you the swearing in of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, in case some of you didn't get to see that, in case you missed it, because that was happening during this program. So we wanted to make sure that you didn't miss any of the highlights. So we're going to be featuring some of those highlights throughout the rest of the program. So at this time, Robert is going to transition us to the streaming of Vice President Kamala Harris's swearing in.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
This is the canoe that a young couple will get gloriously lost in together.
All right, so that was awesome. So just a little bit of information that Kamala D. Harris was sworn in as Vice President of the United States today, stepping into history as the highest ranking female politician in American history. That's very exciting. Additionally, she was sworn in by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is the first Latina Supreme Court justice. So a couple of firsts making history. That's really awesome. Two women of color. Kamala Harris is the daughter of immigrants. She is Asian American, and she is also African American, a graduate of Howard University, a historically Black college, or actually university, and a member of the beloved Divine Nine, and specifically a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And of course, I had to say that because that is also my sorority, and it's why I donned a little bit of pink in my accessorizing today. So now we're going to transition back to Cahoots because we're ready for the next game, because we've got these prizes and we want you to come by the Institutional Inclusive Excellence Suite so that you can pick them up. All right, we're turning it back over to you, Kirby, and to Dr. Lamb.
Alrighty, we are back. Don't forget to come by our office to get your goodie bags. Let's get started with our next Kahoot. Our new game code is 6231294. We got Dandy Oryx, Rocky Seal, Joyful Lemur, we got Golden Gazelle, Wonder Bobcat, Royal Horse, Jolly Badger, and Epic Hawk just entered the game. "30 more seconds to join us here. We have Proud Lion and Snowy Impala, who have entered the game as well. Who's gonna take Inauguration 2? Majestic Yak. Kahoot is really coming through with the random names. They're pretty interesting. Couldn't have made a more random choice myself. Alrighty, let's get it started. Every president has blank after being sworn in. Took his predecessor's hand, kissed the Bible on which he took the oath, given an inauguration address, or snapped a selfie. Given an inauguration address. Dr. Lamb?
Yeah, so this is correct. Every president has given an inauguration address. Many presidents have given more than one because they were elected to more than one term. Not all presidents, all living presidents have even attended their predecessors or their successors' inauguration, so it couldn't be the shaking of the hands. Kissing of the Bible, this was actually something that President Washington did. And every president after him did it, but it died out in the 1950s, or the 1850s, I'm sorry. And obviously not snapped a selfie. This is Lincoln's second inaugural address. This is the famous photo where you can see his assassin somewhere in there. I'm sure you can find online where they tell you where he is. All right.
Don't do this.
Come on,
and I really tested this out beforehand to see if this and it just was like, yeah, for sure, Kirby, we got it for you. But this time they're like, no, it was a joke. What? Just froze, just like that. Is it something that we did?
No, it happens with Kahoot. It is so frustrating because I think the material is so interesting and exciting. I get so excited and then I just have to stop.
We're gonna try this again and hopefully it likes us.
Oh, you got to share it, Kirby. Please.
The code is 9915904. Feel like I'm calling out for bingo. We got Creative Dove, Fast Wolf, Arctic Bunny, Rockstar Wolf, Focus Alpaca, Golden Condor, Golden Otter, Space Sloth, and Groovy Lobster. Let's see who's gonna win. All righty, let's get it started. Departing from precedent, President blank was sworn in by a federal judge, Sarah Hughes. Was it FDR, JFK,
I'm gonna go with
LBJ,
JFK,
or GWB?
Okay, it was President Johnson, and this was because President Kennedy had been assassinated. So there was a famous photo of LBJ being sworn in on Air Force One, actually not in the Bible, but on the Catholic Missal, because as the announcer for today's inaugural program mentioned, President Biden is the second Catholic to be elected to president, and so because Kennedy was Catholic, there was a missile on Air Force One, and Sarah Hughes was, the local federal judge who administered his oath of office.
All right, Focus Alpaca is up top. Arctic Bunny's not far behind with 819. Let's see who gets to the top. How many living outgoing presidents have not attended their successors' inaugurations? 1, 3, 5, or 7?
Oh, wow. So no one answered 3. I put 1 there because living outgoing presidents. So we've had several presidents die in office. I'm not counting those. We've had several outgoing presidents who have not attended the successor's inauguration, both President Adams, President Johnson. This is in the 1850s, 1860s for President Johnson. And then also President Nixon, he resigned and he, was not around for his successor. And then of course with today, President Trump. So that makes 5. Oh, I'm sorry, that was mislabeled. Never mind. We'll give you all prizes. It said the correct answer was 3 and it's not.
That was funny, Dr. Lamb.
Sorry, I just noticed that.
You said it's okay, we'll give everybody prizes.
Sorry. Every president has blank after being sworn in. Took his predecessor's hand, kissed the Bible on which he took the oath, given an inauguration address, or snapped a selfie.
Oh, wow. So everyone got given an inauguration address. We already saw that one. Kirby, by the way, I think when you restarted the game, you had it go in any order. And there is like an order to the questions, right? So this was the first question last time, but we're good. It'll still work.
Okay. Arctic Bunny shot up to the top with 1776. Golden Condor is right behind him with 1730. Until blank, new presidents were sworn in March, not January. 1787, 1837, 1887, or 1937.
Okay, the answer is 1937. The US Constitution was amended. Several of our faculty panelists this morning mentioned that this was done in March, or that it was moved to January, and that some people today still think it should be shortened.
Creative Dove is on top, followed by Focus Alpaca. Is getting real tight. The first president to skip his successor's inauguration was President blank in 1804. Adams, Hamilton, Jefferson, or Jackson.
So it was President Adams who in 1804, yeah, that's not relevant. It's just something I found online. I thought was funny. And there were actually both President Adams. So his son actually skipped the inaugural of his successor, but that was not until 1829. But the first president to do so was John Adams in 1804.
All right, Arctic Bunny is on top with 2747, followed by Golden Condor. Vice President Harris will be sworn in by Sonia Sotomayor, a parent of a service member killed in Iraq, an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, a senator from California, or the governor of Colorado.
Darn it. I am so sorry. But you guys all got the correct answer, which is actually the correct answer. She is an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And also of note, Vice President Harris was sworn in using Thurgood Marshall's Bible. He was the first African-American Black Justice of the Supreme Court.
Good stuff. Thanks, Dr. Lamb.
George Washington took the presidential oath in Richmond, Boston, New York City, or Philadelphia?
All right, it is New York City. This was before the federal district, DC, was established. The new capital of the United States moved around. At the time that Washington took the oath, it was in New York City. They later convened Congress in Philadelphia.
Golden Condor has shot to the top with 36.29, followed by Arctic Bunny. Vice President Harris's Senate seat was filled by California governor's nominee, will be filled by special election next month, devolves to her husband, or sold by the governor of Illinois.
Okay, so yesterday, Vice President Harris officially resigned her Senate seat. There's the letter there that was probably her last thing she did as the senator from California. I wish to make note of the fact that she writes this letter to the governor of California because it is, again, the states that fill the seats in the Senate and, in the House of Representatives. And it's the states that, certify elections for the president as well. So Kamala Harris resigned her seat, and the governor of California has nominated, the new senator from California is going to be a Latino.
All right, Arctic Bunny holding on to that spot, followed by Golden Condor with 36.29. It's a real tight race between these two. President Blank did not take the oath of office with his hand on a Bible, the only one to do so. Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Richard Nixon, or Barack Obama?
And the correct answer was Teddy Roosevelt. He did not want to use a Bible. He's the only one that did not. Most presidents have used, several presidents have used two Bibles. Today, President Biden used a family Bible.
Creative Dove takes the top with 42.37, followed by Arctic Bunny. Last one, by custom, the blank swears in the president. Outgoing president, Speaker of the House, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Okay, so this is by custom. It is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. It's not legally required. Obviously, when President Washington was sworn in, there was no Supreme Court. He hadn't appointed them. And so he was sworn in by a New York magistrate. And as one of our previous questions addressed, in 1962, when JFK was assassinated, LBJ was sworn in by a federal judge as well.
But it would have been awesome for Judge Judy to have sworn in President Biden today.
I think that that'd be cool too.
All right, let's see who takes the top. All righty, shout out to Creative Dove. 5,156 points, got 6 out of 10 correct. Don't forget to stop by our office to pick up your prize. Most importantly, don't forget to come get your goodie bags. And we still have MLK shirts available.
All right, thank you so much, Kirby and Dr. Lamb. So I don't know how well the third Cahoots game is going to go. Dr. Lamb, do you have any idea about the third game?
What do you mean, any idea?
Was that the third one or the second one?
That was just the second one.
Okay.
We can do the third one if we have time. If not, we're good.
Okay. So I think here's what we're going to do. It looks like we've lost most of our participants, but we are so thankful for those who were able to hang with us for the duration. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to bring our program to a close. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lamb for some closing remarks, but I also, before I do that, I do want to thank all of those who contributed to the coordination and development of this program. So of course, I want to thank athletics for the donation of their awesome prizes, which the winners of our Cahoots games will be receiving. I also want to thank the Elections Task Force, of course, for the donation of those goodie bags. Additionally, I would like to thank College of Liberal Arts, the Department of Political Science, Department of History. We really appreciate your contributions to this event, as well as our student organizations that participated today, providing those awesome factoids. I want to thank our faculty panel. They did an outstanding job educating us and enlightening us and giving us some context, both historically and as it relates to things that are currently happening in our nation. So at this time, on behalf of the 2020 Elections Task Force, I'm going to bid you adieu. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lamb, and she is going to give our closing remarks. Dr. Lamb?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ben. I just want to reiterate my thanks to all of the program partners. And this is certainly a very it's an historic day. It's an important day in the life of our nation. Today in President Biden's inaugural address, which was titled America United, he talked about these 4 overlapping challenges: COVID, the economic recession, climate change, and racial justice. I think in the next, in the first 100 days of the President Biden's administration, he's going to sign several executive orders that address these topics. And I'm interested to see, what the president and the Congress have for us ahead. So again, thank you for all of you guys for participating. Thank you for hanging in there with, some of the troubleshooting that we had with Kahoot. I hope you learned a great deal, and I look forward to meeting you throughout the semester. Thanks.